Welcome to another FPL video. Today we're covering 12 more of your FPL teams, and we covered another 12 in a separate video. If you want, check that out as well. And we've got plenty of content on the channel, such as my current draft. I've also got the best budget midfielders, defenders, goalkeepers and forwards, so be sure to check all of that out, and let's try to get this video to 200 likes. It'd be massively appreciated. And without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The first team is sent in by FPL Wiz, and it's a very solid one. You've got two of the best captaincy options in the game with Salah and Harry Kane. You've also got a great balance, and I really like these teams that have the balance in every single position. You're also covering 5 of the top 6 clubs, so to speak, except for United, and you've got Mahrez, who could be a great differential. So I like the reasoning behind all of your picks. You're probably waiting and seeing what United do first before jumping on their assets. They've got a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the opening 5 fixtures, and you've got the best budget-friendly options on the bench, or at least some of the best options for sure. In terms of how to improve this, it's a bit similar to some other stuff that I've covered in previous videos. The Villa double-up could struggle between game weeks 4 to 7, and I'd be very mindful of that. Those fixtures are really bad, and you'd have to maybe rely on some of those bench players to fill in and be a starter for you, which isn't ideal. And I think there are better 8 million midfielders than Diaz right now, but that's all down to personal preference. I think Maddison, Mahrez, etc. are all better. You've obviously got Mahrez already, but I would argue that Maddison's even better than Diaz. But then you look at the fixtures, the team he plays for, and I can see why you've gone for the Colombian. I would give this a 9 out of 10. I think it's a very solid draft, and to be honest, it's a really good way to start the season. And maybe you don't need to make any changes. It's all down to what you personally think. I would probably look for another 8 million midfielder than Diaz though. This might be the first example of what we like to call a freemium draft with Salah, Son and Haaland, and it's surprisingly balanced for it, to be honest, and that's what I really commend with this draft. You've also got double-ups of City, Liverpool and Spurs, which I think is definitely fine. I wouldn't encourage too many double-ups because then you're relying on 4 or 5 teams to do very well. Otherwise, you might struggle in a particular week, but I think those are 3 of the best teams to double up on. And you've also got Botman and Undav, who could be very nice differentials, but I would be a bit unsure if Undav is going to play week in, week out, at least from the start, with preseason giving us a bit of an insight into that. Undav has only started 2 games, Welbeck started the others. Undav has scored in preseason, but I would be a bit concerned about that. And in terms of how to improve, Tomiyasu is back in training, but it's very unlikely that he's going to start in game week 1, so you could go to another 4-point million defender, such as Ben White, Lewis Dunk. You've already got Botman, to be fair. And another way to improve this, or something else to keep in mind, is that Thomas Strakosha has signed for Brentford, so Raya might not be as nailed as he once was. And if his minutes are in doubt, you could go to another 4.5 million goalkeeper, or make a downgrade elsewhere and upgrade your goalkeeper to a 5 million option, or perhaps even 5.5 million. But other than that, it's a good draft. I like the Martinelli and Neto picks, especially Martinelli, and it's a very solid draft overall. I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. On screen, you can see Sutindra's team, and it has the best squad depth of any team that we have covered. I don't think you necessarily need that much squad depth because you're going to have a lot of benching headaches, but it is also a plus point, and you're never really going to be short of players, in my opinion. You've got Son, who is the best Salah replacement, and I think you can get away with not having the Egyptian. And you've got a solid attacking duo. Rashford is one of the best at his price point in the midfield position. In terms of how to improve this, I think it's the benching headaches. It could be very problematic at times. And also, there are better options than Diaz, in my opinion. You may disagree, and that's completely fine. And I think you could downgrade someone from the bench and upgrade Raya. I think that's what I would look to do. And you could even downgrade 2 of your players. You don't necessarily need 3 playing options on the bench. You've got a kind of set and forget 4 million budget goalkeeper in Hennessy, which is fine, but I would probably look to downgrade one of your outfield bench players as well. Let me know what you think of that one, but this is an 8.5 out of 10 for me. It's a solid draft, but I think you don't need that much squad depth. Here we have John Martin's team, and it's another balanced squad, which I really like. You've got 2 great captaincy options in Haaland and Salah, and you've got the 8 million midfielder slot, which I think is very important. It's not absolutely necessary, and if you have Salah and Son, that does kind of counteract that. Otherwise, I would highly encourage everyone to try to fit in an 8 million midfielder, because I think there are so many options around that price range. And you've got Ramsdale, who could be one of the best 5 million goalkeepers this season, despite his very shaky end to the last campaign. In terms of how to improve this, I think there are better defenders around Creswell's price. I think I would go for someone else, whether it's 4.5 million or 5 million, who will get more clean sheets, maybe not so many attacking returns, but I think with those defenders around that price, clean sheets are the bread and butter of the points. And I think another way to improve, or something that you lack, is the Spurs coverage. Obviously, it's very hard to cover every single team, but you've got no Perisic, you've got no Son or Kane. That could hinder you in some game weeks, but of course, you've still got a very good team overall, and it's impossible to cover every single one of these great options at our disposal. But apart from that, I think this is all pretty good. One suggestion I would say, for example, is getting Cash, Trippier or Zinchenko instead of Creswell, or downgrade to Williams, and then you can do Neto all the way up to Rashford, which could be worth it, but once again, not completely necessary. But I would give this draft an 8.5 out of 10, just like the last two, and don't worry, there's going to be some other scores later in this video. Marcus has sent in another very balanced team. I like the two 8 million midfielders. I think that gives you more flexibility. There are so many options to cover, and you've got two of those slots, so I think you do benefit from that a little bit more than the rest of us. You've got a Liverpool triple up, which I really like. You've got Trent, Diaz and Salah. My preference is Robertson, Trent and Salah, but then again, you also have to think about the alternatives in those positions. You've got the City double up as well of Cancelo and Haaland, which is for me the best double up you can have. And you've got good budget options. In terms of how to improve this team though, I think Saka, Maddison, Bowen, Sancho and Mahrez could all be better than Luis Diaz, and I would be a bit concerned about David Raya with the signing of Thomas Strakosha, and also of second season syndrome taking a big part of Brentford's season, and it could really hinder them. And also, I think there are better 4.5 million defenders than Diego Dallo. I don't trust United defence just yet, despite how impressive they have been in pre-season. Only one clean sheet and an assist for Dallo, to be fair, but I still would be very concerned, and I would probably rather go for an Arsenal defender, or maybe Lewis Dunk, Botman, etc. Let me know what you think of that one. This is an 8 out of 10 for me, maybe even an 8.5. I'm kind of conflicted between those two, but I think if you kind of tweak those few things that I said, this would easily be a 9 out of 10 draft, but it's looking very good. You've got the foundations, and this is, once again, another good team. Up next, we have Kieran's team, and for me, the best part about it is the triple ups for City and Liverpool. Not too many complaints there. There is no Salah, which I think could be quite worrying, but we'll get onto that a little bit later. I also somewhat like the double up in Chelsea defence. I like the Reece James pick. Not so much the Koulibaly one. I'd rather have Ben Chilwell at $500,000 more, or Edouard Mendy at $500,000 less. And you've also got Perisic around the same price, who you could consider. And you've got all these other 5 million options like Zinchenko, Cash, Trippier if you want to go there. And you've got a kind of decent squad overall, to be fair. You've got Kane and Haaland, which I really like. It's another good example of what you can do if you have no Salah or Son. But I would encourage one premium midfielder, because midfielders tend to score more points than forwards. They get more points for scoring a goal. They get the clean sheet point. So I would heavily consider that. And in terms of other things to really consider, I think there are better options than Murphy and Greenwood, for example. It's not a really big deal, but Andreas Pereira, Colback, you've even got Josh De Silva are better than Murphy, and then you've got Archer and a few others like Taylor who are better than Greenwood in my opinion, but it's still very close there in those positions. And no Salah or Son. I think the midfield is slightly weak as a result. Yes, you've got Diaz, Bailey and Saka. You've got two of those 8 million midfielders, which is nice, but I think you really need that kind of premium midfielder like Son or Salah, and to do that, unfortunately, you have to downgrade one of Kane or Haaland, and I would probably change Koulibaly. Apart from that, this team is looking good. I would give this a 7.5 out of 10, and there are some nice things about it, and I think you can build upon this. The next team is sent in by IOA03. I think that's right. You've got the Liverpool triple up. I really like that. I can't really complain too much. You've got Trent, Robertson and Salah. For me, that is the best triple up. You've also got a double up there of City with Ederson and Cancelo. And you've got a good forward line. James, Zinchenko and Rashford are also very big, differentials potentially, at least in the case of Zinchenko and Rashford. James is highly owned, but I think it's worth it over Chilwell because of pre-season and the lack of minutes for Ben Chilwell there. But I think there are better options than Colback and Greenwood. That's one way to improve. And there is no 8 million midfielder. I would highly encourage that. And I think your midfield is slightly weak as a result, despite having Rashford and Salah, who could be very good once again. And I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. If you can get that 8 million midfielder and maybe tweak things up a little bit, perhaps by downgrading a defender, you're looking very good for Game Week 1. Luca Ladd's team is on screen, and you've got a great defence, you've got a solid attack, and you've got two captaincy options. So there's a lot to like with this draft. I like the Cancelo, Perisic, James, Robertson, Trent kind of picks with Ederson, because you're covering the top 4 clubs from last season, and you've even got double ups there in the two best teams across Europe, arguably. You've got Haaland and Jesus, which is very good. Salah captaincy option. So you've got plenty to choose from. But I think the midfield is very imbalanced. You've got Bruno Guimaraes and Neto, and the rest are 4.5 million options. I would try to get one medium price midfielder, whether it's a 7 to 8 million midfielder. It's up to you, but I would try to get that 8 million midfielder slot. And in order to do that, unfortunately, you might have to downgrade one of your defenders, like I said for some of the previous teams as well. And I think Perisic, despite the fact that I like him as an option, he hasn't started a game yet in pre-season. Sessegnon has started in every single game. Perisic has come off the bench in one of them, I believe, but I would be a bit concerned about his minutes and whether he will start against Southampton in game week 1. And maybe he's going to start in game week 2 against Chelsea, but the fixture you really want him to start in is game week 1. So I'd be a bit concerned about that, but it's still a good team. It's a 7.5 out of 10. If you can sort out the midfield, this could be so much better. This is Madrista's team, and it is a bit dark, yet it still should be quite clear to see some of the players here. So you've got the City triple up of Diaz, Cancelo and Haaland, which I really like. The midfield is great, to be honest. You've got Son in there, so you cover Salah well, and you've got probably one of the best midfields that we've seen in this video. And I really like the Son captaincy. I think he's probably the best option at our disposal in game week 1. In terms of how to improve though, I think there are better keepers than Sanchez. Maybe not a 4.5 million, but I would try to stretch to a 5 or a 5.5 million goalkeeper. That's my current thinking at the moment. I might change my mind, and then in a few weeks' time, I'd actually go back on this and say, you know what? Go for Sanchez, he's a good option. And Tielemans could move away from Leicester, and I don't think he's the best option anyway. You could go to Rashford, for example. Even if you've already got Sancho, I would rather go for Rashford instead of Tielemans. And you've also got Martinelli, Neto, and a few others around that price bracket. Even Lingard, potentially, who we discussed in the best budget midfielders. And there are better budget options. I wouldn't want to start Janssen and Williams every week, so that is something else that I'd be very concerned about. So this team gets a 7.5 out of 10. There's quite a lot of good things going about it, but I think having to start Janssen or one of those budget midfielders or options on your bench isn't ideal, and I think that does hinder you in certain game weeks. Here we have Jet Curry's team, and you've got some great defensive double-ups, but I would maybe diversify slightly because you've got Edison, Cancelo, Trent, Robertson, James Chilwell. You're covering 3 teams, but I would maybe try to change one of those Chelsea defenders and spice things up a little bit and cover 4 different defenses rather than just 3. You're putting all your eggs in 3 baskets. City and Liverpool I have no concerns about, but with Chelsea, I would be slightly concerned, and I think I would want a bit more diversity there. You've got 2 great captaincy options. You've even got some nice differentials there like Sterling, and Edison is one of the best goalkeepers in the game. But in terms of how to improve this team, I think your midfield is way too imbalanced, and I would still go for Son or Salah personally. There's still a few others, even like Bruno Fernandes as well, and it's quite similar level to Sterling at the moment, perhaps. There's also Kevin De Bruyne, who I think is very underrated. We haven't talked about him enough, and he hasn't featured in any of these teams so far, which is very surprising. But I personally believe those 2 12 million midfielders, Son and De Bruyne, as well as Salah, are all much better than Sterling, and I would try to reshuffle things a little bit. So you can downgrade Chilwell, for example, to a budget defender, and then try to upgrade Sterling to Heung-min Son. And another thing is that Chelsea are all over the place, and you've got a triple up there, so I would steer clear from that. Maybe have 1 or 2, but a triple up, not right now. That's just my opinion. You might disagree, and Chelsea can still start the season very well, but based on what we've seen in the last couple of weeks during pre-season, they've looked an absolute shambles on and off the pitch, and you've got no Salah or Son. And we all know that midfielders score more points than forwards. So I would also maybe downgrade one of your forwards, despite the fact there's a nice kind of differential combination of Haaland and Kane, and try to get that Heung-min Son or Salah in the midfield, and also potentially that 8 million midfielder. And I think your structure will be much better and also more balanced in the grand scheme of things. So this team will get a 7.5 out of 10. There's quite a few nice things about it. I like the kind of different picks you've gone for, but triple Chelsea is something that I just can't condone at the moment. We're approaching the end of this video with the final 2 teams. This is sent in by Daniel GC. You've got the Spurs duo there of Son and Kane. You can't really complain too much about that. And you've got Salah. So this is another example of a freemium draft. And you've got Botman and Bailey as differentials. I really like those 2. And you've got Plange, who scored a hat-trick versus Ipswich Town, as we mentioned earlier. And he featured versus QPR in pre-season. Raya isn't ideal though. I think there are better goalkeepers out there, and there is no 8 million midfielder slot, but then you do compensate for that with Salah, Son and Harry Kane. So this is actually a very good draft, and I would actually be tempted to give it an 8.5 out of 10. It's bordering between that and an 8. It's a very solid one, and there's quite a lot to like, but I would change the goalkeeper. I think that's the main weakness of this team, but that's just a personal opinion, and I might be wrong when Game Week 1 begins. We're in the end game now. This is Abinav's team, and this is looking very solid. A lot of red. That's kind of one thing that really stands out to you. But the City defensive double-up is very good with Edison and Cancelo. You've got the squad depth there with Bailey on the bench. You've got the Liverpool fullbacks, which is always a tick in my book. and you're covering 5 of the top 6 clubs except for Chelsea, and I don't really blame you for that because they're looking very poor at the moment, and you've got 2 great captaincy options in Salah and Harry Kane. But what I would say is that you've got an over-reliance on Arsenal. You've got a triple up there with Zinchenko, Martinelli and Jesus. I would calm down a little bit with Arsenal. I'm not just saying it for you, but people in general who are maybe overhyping the Gunners a little bit. I think 1 or 2 is fine. A triple up, I can understand with the fixtures, and if you back them to do well, then go for it. But I'd be a bit cautious about that. That's all I'm saying. And you've also got a bit of an over-reliance on United with Dalot and Rashford. And Arsenal and United have proven to be, in the last few years, to be very inconsistent and unreliable, especially in high-pressure situations. And there's no City attack or 8 million midfielder, which also is a bit of a downside to this team, but it's still a very solid team overall. In terms of how to improve this as well, I would go for Archer or Plange instead of Greenwood, and another one is Taylor from Nottingham Forest. But this is still very good overall. I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. But I think having 5 players from Arsenal and United is a bit too much. That's the only thing I'd really say in terms of the starting 11. Other than that, very good team sent in by everyone. Thank you very much for that. And even those that I haven't covered today, I'll try to cover it in future videos as always. But I really appreciate all your support. Let's try to get this video to 200 likes. And be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM. You can also become a Patreon or a channel member. The links are in the description below. The same goes for the Discord server and the FPL League. So be sure to check that out. All the best of luck. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer break and have a great FPL season. And I'll see you next time.